That's why we had conflict. Welcome everyone to another session of Walking with Randy, to where we talk about writing, speaking, coaching, marketing, and marriage. Today we are talking about marriage again. We have been talking about the topic of how important it is to meet each other's needs. Then previously we talked about making a list of each other's needs, and then we each ranked those, or talked about ranking those needs according to the order of importance for each of us. And then we were to trade the list. So now we want to talk about using the information we get from that process to its best advantage of helping us within our marriages. So, as we look at these lists, then we may say, oh, that's why we had conflict. I didn't realize the importance that my spouse placed upon that particular need within his or her life. So we want to realize what it is that causes us to have the different perceptions of our needs. Well, first of all, we have our differing backgrounds. I'll give you an example, and actually in the introduction to some of my books, I reprint this example. But I grew up in a family that enjoyed going camping. When I was young, we went tent camping. Later on, we got a little camping trailer. And then later on, my parents got even more elaborate trailers, or at one point, a very nice motorhome. That was after I was married that they got the motorhome. On the other hand, my wife grew up in a family that had never gone camping. So this was a new experience for her. And to her credit, she was willing to do that a few times. But see, the nostalgia was not there for her like it was for me, and the fun things that I remember. Now, I have to admit that on some of our camping trips that we had after we got married, there was a lot of uncomfortable things to remember, which would not help in the future. So if I felt a need to go camping, or desire, maybe not so much a need, then her desire would not be nearly so great, because first of all, she did not have the nostalgia that I did. And secondly, she had even uncomfortable experiences to look back to. Now, I'm not saying that she would never go camping again, although that might be the case. But I realize that her need for that is not nearly as great as my need. And her need to perhaps avoid it some is much greater than it would be for me, because of my optimism of hoping that I could have a joyful experience again. Now, we did have one or two good camping trips later in our marriage, but I have to admit that most of them have not been as joyful as those two. But those are the differing backgrounds. The second area is in our interests. We have different interests. Some of those interests are long-standing interests, and we developed those early in our lives, and we followed those interests. As we followed those interests, we got good at some of the skills that was involved in those interests. We experienced some feelings of success in those areas, and that makes us feel good. And so we continue on in our interests. And some of them, though, may have been long-standing interests, but we have developed interests later in life too. One of my interests came in the area of construction work. I did not do a lot of it when I was young, I had watched my father do some construction work and others do it, but I mainly was relegated to going and getting things, and I was not taught very much of the skills that were involved in that. But we came to a point in our lives where our income was so sporadic, we did not think that we would qualify for a loan in order to build a house or even to purchase a house that had already been built. We did have a piece of land upon which we could place a house. So I developed an interest in construction. Also, when we had some home repairs earlier in our marriage, our income a lot of times did not make it easy for us to just call a repairman to come out. And so I started learning about things and how they worked. And did that out of necessity, but I also became very interested in how things worked, electronic things and construction things. Another area for me later on in my life was I became interested in computers. Some programming, I learned a little bit about programming in BASIC, but there is so much you can do with computers that don't involve certain types of coding. And so I became very interested in that. And my wife is glad for me to learn more about that, although sometimes it becomes a little expensive whenever we get some new computer equipment or things like that. On the other hand, I have been able to monetize those things to a certain extent, and it has certainly turned out well in our lives. For instance, I have 3 books that are on Amazon right now, and it's because of my interest in computers and word processing and developing websites and things like that, that I have been able to complete those books. So as an example, we had different interests. And then I mentioned earlier that men like feelings of success and they don't like feelings of failure. They're not a married couple. 2 different counselors went together and wrote a book. And they said that one of the major things that a man did not like in marriage was the feeling of shame. And it was not the shame that came from doing something evil, but it was more like the shame of not doing something well. And so whenever we look at the needs that are listed, sometimes those needs are related to things that are related to our successes or failures in life. And so the things that make us feel good are things that we perceive to be important. And the things that make us feel uncomfortable would be placed lower on our lists. And in the same way would work with a wife as she's looking at the lists. Well, anyway, so you have these 2 lists. You have ranked the list according to the order of importance as it meeting a need in your life. And then you have traded that list with your spouse. You may have found some revelations in doing that. You may have found some things there, and as you look at that, you may say, oh, that's why we had some conflicts in the past, because I didn't perceive this one thing to be as important as my wife did. Or the wife may say, well, we had conflict because I didn't realize how important that was to him. So take your list and discuss your list. These pre-made lists that have come from the research on marriage may also cause us to have a discussion about something we have never talked about within our marriages. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you. If you would like more videos like these, you can go to my blog and you can get the video and you can get a written version of what's on the video. Hopefully we improve the written version a little bit, perhaps over the video version. But you can go to randycarney.com. It's randycarney.com, and then you can go up on the page and you can click on the tab that says marriage, and that will take you to the blog posts that are related to that. Whenever you type that in, it may say Randy's Blogs at the top, and you're at the right place if you have done that. Well, hope you have a great day. Until another session for Walking with Randy, this is Randy Carney, wishing you the best in your marriage.